Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear participants in this conference, and you are very important, of course, as you know, if we use the language of soccer, we are more or less in the second half of the game. We all watched yesterday's events. We got the reports from the mayors who are concerned and also representatives of the NGOs. We also listened to the reports of the refugees from the region, and we have heard about the dramatic problems with which they are confronted, the tasks which they have to comply with, and sometimes you feel almost ashamed that we have not done more. So we sometimes give the impression that we are already complaining about first world problems. And of course, this puts into perspective what we are discussing here today. The topic is here today, and we are geographically approaching to our region and Central Europe, and those refugees who have arrived in these territories. One or the other transit country was crossed, and refugees have to arrive and have to put down their roots. And of course, there are differences in the different communities. And in my country, there are also communities that are not the final destinations, but that they are transit communities. We're in the second half of the game, and as in soccer, you have to already have some exchange, and some of the participants, for example, Peter Strader, has fallen ill and he unfortunately can't attend. So Andreas Minich has stepped in. He is a city municipal councillor of Korneuburg, and the mayor of Uppsala could not come, but Laura Schopp is here from the youth ring, federal youth ring, and Masa Gashavi is here, and Anita Tasharovi is replaced by her. However, all those deputies will simply make their statements on behalf of the persons they represent. So Andreas Babler, the mayor of Traiskirchen, has the floor. He will be the moderator, and he has spoken already several times, and he was introduced several times. So I need not explain to you who is Andreas Babler. Andy, you have the floor. Yes, thank you. Also, I cannot be overlooked because of my weight. So good morning. Of course, when we take a look at our region, we always have to remember that there are great differences in the way in which people see the refugee problem. And yesterday we also heard that the question is central whether refugees have really found their target country, their destination or not. What are the wishes, what are the concepts, what are the ideas and hopes of these people? And we, of course, are sitting together here with colleagues who come from transit countries, and here, of course, the conditions are different. What was important, there are many common interests despite the differences, despite the way in which the refugees are received. It is necessary in all countries to create new resources. Namely, two criteria have to be analyzed. Namely, first of all, to institutionalize the room for refugees. Resources have to be created and tapped so that we always have to see immediately what the people who arrive need. So this is very important. This is the first step, and what measures have to be taken. So this is the first phase. Very often, of course, psychological counseling is very important to help people to overcome the traumas of their flight. The second thing is that we have to create the resources for the second phase. Once people have arrived, the question is, what expectations do these people have? What hopes do they have? What skills do they have? What are the perspectives that they conceive? And what And we need this information. We need really information about the expectations of refugees, how refugees want to participate in the society in which they will live in the future. And right from the beginning, we must give them an opportunity to participate in this society, to engage in a dialogue and to use the resources. So we need not only money, of course, money is a prerequisite for creating resources, but we need more than that. I believe the demand that we all share is that we have to try to cover the entire area, namely asylum and flight. We have to get this out of the vicious circle. We do not have to focus on problem orientation, and this predominates at the moment in all media discussions. We have a problem orientation with regard to this area, and we discuss flight and refugee also from the perspective of security policy. And this leads to a situation where the draft laws and the bills are going into the direction of talking about technical investigation and political decisions and security technology. And there is less and less room for resources. We have to get out of this vicious circle, and therefore you have to consider what or which bodies are responsible for what activities and who will deal with this area. And in Austria, we would need such a clear decision. What would it mean? So if you get this whole complex of questions out of the Federal Ministry of the Interior, of course, we would need the resources, and this was also discussed in the working groups. We have to consider this as a shared interest. We also have to develop offers to support refugees, offers that are not only related to employment, but first of all, the banal things such as young people who live in Austria, or vocational guidance and guidelines have to be developed and guidelines have to be institutionalized. We need a catalog that shows how a refugee can now orient himself and how can refugees contribute to our society. So we need various guidelines. So things that are necessary for orienting oneself in everyday life. It is not evident how the road code is to be interpreted. So when you arrive, you don't know really all the signs and so on. So, and there are many other things in public life that have to be explained. And Traiskirchen is a special case because it's a reception center. But we must look beyond. What does that mean for the accommodation? We went to young families who were accommodated in Schwechat last week, and they have major problems. They are in a support organization, so they invite them to come there and to give some support. But on an everyday basis, people are alone and they have few ideas as to how to interact with the small structure of this society. And they would have to address themselves to a body, and we need an institutionalization. So we need prefab criteria, so to speak. We need criteria that are clearly defined, and people will have to get these in order to address themselves and to find out what they really need and what they can do to contribute to this to society. So this is the starting point of integration and everything that is associated with integration. And we would need to create proper mechanisms for that. Thank you, Andreas. We now have a guest who has just joined us. Jürgen Dupper, the mayor of Passau. This is a German town close to Austria, very close to Austria. You were confronted with tasks which I described earlier. You are not only a reception area, but also a transit town. And during the high time of the refugees, you had refugee influx. You had to create a lot of accommodation. You had to send these refugees into accommodation. And Passau was a model case. It was a showpiece where things functioned very well. I should like to give the floor to you so that you can report to us how you functioned. And so perhaps we can move a bit towards best practices, despite all the problems that we have. What did function? What functioned well? Where can we learn from one another? Mr. Dupa, you have the floor. Thank you very much for this chance to attend this conference. I should like to thank all my colleagues who cooperated in finding a good solution here in Europe and who are still cooperating. Passau is a traditional town, a border town with Austria. We have 50,000 inhabitants, and from September until December, we welcomed 300,000 refugees. We looked after them, we supported them, and then, of course, we tried to integrate some portion of these. It was a major challenge, but this was characterized by a tremendous commitment of the civic society. So this is really decisive. There were many other towns and cities where the civil society really did a lot to contribute and to help, to support refugees. Thousands of volunteers were involved. And of course, it depends to some extent how politicians intonate these topics, with what degree of responsibility. So I can say that not every intervention is legitimate, but we were able to deal with this acute phase, and we are now in the midst of preparing for further steps, and we are already active. We consider what we can do for those who, for a time-limited period, want to stay or who want to stay forever. So this is the basic question. It's obvious that we help people who are in distress, but now the question is what will happen in the medium term? How can we offer a good home to these people? We are relying on regional and local solutions. Of course, we also realize that a Europe-wide or a federal-wide approach would be desirable, but we cannot wait for such a decision or for such instructions. So at present, we are using our own staff, our own finances, and we try to make sure that language tuition courses are offered in every school and in every day center for children. We have people who instruct children and refugees, who teach the language, and we also organize information coffee shops. And I think children learn the language automatically. What is important is the access to their parents. In all accommodation facilities, we offer language courses, and we are supported by many volunteers who are highly committed. Secondly, we have also case-to-case conferences where we take a look at every individual case, and together with educational institutions, and we call this the Agency for Work, or the Labor Office, you could say, whatever the name might be, we really take a close look at the skills of the refugees. We consider what individual refugees need, and then we try to tailor the solutions to the condition of the refugee. The housing market is not a particular problem. We've been investing for many years in housing, and of course, housing has to be made available to families. Many of the families want to stay together. They don't want to be split up. I think we have to learn a lot about the individual wishes of the families who have come here together. Of course, we have a privileged economic situation. This is why we have many perspectives in the labor market, but it's not too easy. Nevertheless, I believe we all agreed that it's difficult to integrate the refugees. We will have many setbacks on this path that is highly ambitious, and it will take some time. It will not be easy to increase the demand for labor, and the skills will not always fit the demands. But I think we will manage if we develop the right solutions. This is the major challenge, and I always ask people to be relaxed. And we have already experienced so many things, and all of a sudden people become hysterical. I prefer to live in a country in which admits people, millions of refugees. I prefer to live in this country than living in a country where people have a mass exodus to save themselves. And how shall I put it? We had a somewhat bumpy road since the Second World War. Germany has been an immigrant country, an immigration country. The displaced persons, millions of people after the Second World War, came into our territory, the so-called guest workers, and we had made any mistake in integrating them. But I hope we've learned from these mistakes. We have 4.5 million people from Russia, from the former Soviet Union, ever since the 80s, and we have benefited from these, and we will be able to cope with the situation. Again, we have a stable democracy, we have a reasonable economic structure, and if we succeed now to integrate all those who are of goodwill, I think we will manage.
Danke, Jürgen.
Thank you, Jürgen Dupper. We prefer to live in a country which admits millions of people, and then to live in a country where millions are leaving the country. I think we should remember this sentence, and you should repeat it again and again whenever you engage in a debate. I should like to welcome Peter Hacker as well. He is the coordinator of refugee matters in Vienna. He was a bit late. He apologized. I should like to ask him immediately to take the floor. You've heard what has been said so far. I want to give him the floor because Passau is a big town and it has similar problems and similar challenges as Vienna. And we have here a difference whether you have a 1 million or 2 million town or whether you have a village or a small town. So the situation is different. So a transit city is different from a destination town. You are confronted with challenges, particularly in the past 6 months. You've been confronted with many challenges. What would you say was successful? What ideas can be continued and developed further? We've heard that German courses from the first day in the accommodation centers. We do not have that because of a different legislation. And these examples are very good. In what direction should we think, and what can we do in order to improve the things that already function well? Thank you very much. But I am sorry, I had a strategic meeting and I had announced that I would be slightly late. So we had this meeting which had not been planned. So I think I can make a similar report, nearly an identical report as the mayor of Passau. We have this major influx of refugees that we have this influx throughout Europe, and there are some junctions where many transit activities had to take place. So in our capital, we were faced with a tremendous task. We want to handle these problems, and we did handle these problems with decency. And also there was close cooperation between the public sector and the organizations that are active in the social sphere and the civil society. So people who spontaneously determined or decided that they would help. From September until December, 650,000 overnight stays by refugees were recorded, and we coped with this in 4 months. We had opened 100 accommodation centers. So every week we opened several accommodation centers, and this is a tremendous achievement to find so many facilities for accommodating refugees. This was really dramatic, and many owners of houses and many companies said, okay, they would cooperate, and they made available spaces for a limited time to accommodate refugees. And this is not something self-evident. We got office spaces and some other spaces from companies, and we would not ever have received such spaces. And we got these because society as a whole said we are facing a major task. We have to see to it that we have to help to cope with this problem. And this happened. I think we can be happy about this. After 6 months, we can summarize this. As I said, 100 accommodations in 4 months. This means 3 to 4 new accommodation facilities every week. And this was a tremendous challenge for the large NGOs and small NGOs. And of course, we will have to cope with this for some time. It was not only necessary to make available funds, but also, of course, several times we were promised more funds from the state, and of course, it's always an additional challenge for the different organizations. But it is really a tremendous challenge to cope with these demands. And when you want to hire staff, you have to train them. And we see that we are working on structures now. We set up the emergency. Overnight stay centers. So we still have the other accommodation facilities, and they house normally the asylum seekers. We know the numbers of applications for asylum seekers, and there's a large number. We forgot that we already have more refugees in our country, and we've accommodated them in the past. For example, during the Balkan crisis, we had more refugees, and over the decades, we had similar influxes. But what is happening now is a completely new situation is taking shape, because we don't know how we will act politically as a state, how we will deal with this situation. And this insecurity in the basic statement and with regard to the targets that we set ourselves results from the political debate. And now the political debate permeates society at large. I had some meetings with district representatives, hours of sessions, and I do not see that there is a change in the public opinion. I cannot say that there is a change and a shift in public opinion, but those who always wanted to help still want to help. Those who are positive have always been positive. They are still positive, and those who were always against are still against this. And we had this also at the time when the majority went to the Heldenplatz and supported a party that really gave a clear statement, made a clear statement. So I do not believe that there are shifts in public opinion, but the capacity to articulate one's views has changed, and people are more insecure in arguing their cases. Of course, such reports as we had about the Cologne events and the events in Paris, of course, have a negative impact, and people become more insecure. And I think we're going through a very, very important phase. It's very important to be very clear what messages are emitted by the government and to guide us through the further development. And if we do not get such statements, and we don't get these statements, so some of the statements are very illogical, and then people become insecure. And this is something which concerns me very much at the moment, because people want to know that the people governing a country, just like the managers of a company, will present their plans very clearly, and it's very important to have a plan. So we must know what is the plan. Is there a plan? And this is something which I'm missing. We would need clear instructions, and it's even worse to say, well, we have a plan, and everybody knows that the plan is bad and cannot be, and is not feasible, cannot be implemented. And there are various data that are indicated, and they cannot be really reached. And not only in the party politics debate, but also in society at large, we have to consider what is feasible, and then we can understand the challenges we have to face and take up. And then we have to work really hard, the really hard work that is typical of democracies. We have a problem with the development of the labor market. We are a growing city. The growth rate is 30 to 35,000 people a year. So you have tremendous growth, and we need an expansion of the infrastructure. We need technical infrastructure. We need more kindergartens, nursery schools, and so on. We need the jobs for these people. And this means that we need to be very clear about what we are going to do. And the decisive question is, and of course, it's getting boring because the central policy questions. So the question is, how do we, what does it mean in terms of dates and so on? So the question, then things get very, very boring, but very decisive. We have to invest in infrastructure, and we must invest in infrastructure. Whenever a community grows, we have to improve the infrastructure. And if this automatically means that our debts become larger, then this becomes problematic, of course. There are some clear signs from the European Union that instill hope in me, but we have to emit more of these signs and signals. So I believe that the mood in the population continues to be positive at the end of the day. They want to support refugees. Of course, there is a humanistic or social policy feeling in the city, and this is typical of the Viennese. It is not typical only of Vienna, but it is typical of Vienna that people do have empathy. And I believe it's very important, and we have not reached a point of no return. It will be important to foster these emotions with feasible facts. And I believe that this is a major task, a tremendous task. Hundreds of thousands interviews were held, and I said that we are, of course, facing tremendous challenges with regard to immigration. And of course, we will be able to cope, yes, but we have to increase our efforts. We have to have a clear commitment, and we have to work very hard. We have to step out our efforts. Apparently, it's a bit similar to Passau. We want people to come to our country and to understand our rules. We want people to accept our values. And we have this debate about the question, well, it means that people have to learn German from the first day of their arrival. And all of a sudden, there is no agreement on the question or the proposal that when people arrive, they have to attend German lessons. Of course, I'm in favor of these German courses, and I'll tell you why. Because I believe that people who go into a country, to arrive in a territory for whatever reason, need to, whatever their motivation for coming here, I'm convinced that without learning the language of the country, they will not be integrated. And I don't think we have to convince people that they have to learn German. It's obvious. So I'm in favor of mandatory German lessons because this forces us to offer these courses. We do not have to drive refugees to German courses. We don't have enough German courses, and this is why I should like to introduce mandatory German courses. This is absolutely necessary. We have to fight for the financing of German courses. This is a tremendous effort. So we have to explain refugees the basic functioning of our state, how you pay for a doctor, who pays for the doctors, and that there is a separation of powers between public prosecutors and the police. All these things are not matters of course for the refugees who arrive here. These are the achievements of our democracy. And of course, we need to provide information, and we will have to work very hard. And the points have not been shifted yet. To simply say, this is spooky, and this is a spook, and you can be perseverant and can't just make the spook disappear. This cannot happen. The refugees are here, and the overwhelming majority of the population believes that they are undecided. They do not know how to respond, and therefore it will be very important in the coming weeks to emit clear messages and to communicate the certainty that it will be strenuous, that we will have to work hard, but that it will be feasible to achieve all this.
Danke, Peter Hacker.
Thank you, Peter Hacker. Well, Peter Hacker has made it very clear the messages that come from the top level are decisive. And here we are facing a situation, and also in the context of this discussion and the discussions we've had over the last few days. So on the ground, at the municipal level, the communities, among the mayors, among civil society that takes action at the local level. There are lots of people who have taken the right approach, but obviously the top levels do not work. So just say, let those at the bottom level work, and well, do not have the others interfere. However, we know there are lots of communities where there's a lot of commitment, and there are other communities where there is no commitment at all. This is something we should also like to address. Well, the mayor on my left-hand side, Peter Bosch, is from a completely different municipality. He's from a small municipality in Burgenland, and for decades he has admitted refugees in a federal province that really tries to undertake an all-out effort to make sure that no refugees are admitted. Obviously, you are also affected by the current discussion, also at the top level. So how have you succeeded in taking your citizens along and convincing them that your approach is the right approach? But the election results have shown that people absolutely appreciate what you have done. Well, fortunately, at the election, we only have the people from Neudorf, from my municipality, who are allowed to vote, and not those at province level. So this is why I was able to generate these good results. Well, as regards Burgenland itself, just to, well, quantify, so that this should not mean that I was not proud of my province. As of the 13th of January 2016, Burgenland has committed itself to take in 2,694 people. So this is just this small number. 2,694 individuals, and currently we made 2,401, and this is this famous share 90%. And in the media coverage, well, there's missing 10%, and as if these were 14 containers full of refugees. But, well, in actual figures, these are 292 individuals, which Burgenland, with its 2,980,000 inhabitants, had to admit. And this would mean that we move to the good side. A few words about the size. Burgenland is not a province of conurbations with 5,000 inhabitants. We have the sixth largest community. In total, there are 170 municipalities and 83 host refugees. 88 municipalities still believe that they do not have to admit refugees. And this is also suggested to them by the province level. The famous quote is, there is a competition among people and among politicians who strive to protect strive to protect their inhabitants against people who seek protection. Imagine that. And also at the political level, there are lots of differences. Some called for them, some have not undertaken any steps, and now we try to reach a compromise. So what we have actually succeeded in achieving in Neudorf, which is just 50 kilometers far from Vienna, we have succeeded just in implementing one thing, and it is the fact that, well, the local citizens do not adopt a negative attitude towards refugees. And we have had this attitude even at a time when there was no refugee discussions. So this is an industrial community. 2,000 jobs have been created in this area. Large companies, like for instance, even people from Passau know these companies. We are a municipality which attracts immigrants, which attracts people who come. So people seek accommodation. We require infrastructure, childcare facilities, but well, it is not families plus grandparents who move to Neudorf. So we have more or less the same issues Vienna is facing, but only at a lower scale. And we always try to make sure that our local population understands that if there is a new arrival, then they should not necessarily embrace them, but at least they should welcome them and accept them. And this is no difference whether this family is from Turkey, from Kurdistan, or from Bosnia. And therefore, it is no problem. And we have the Sarah house. Our colleague Wertner is here, and Sarah is accommodation where over 25 years we have hosted people from lots of different backgrounds. There was a mix of nations, and people are very proud of that. In a primary school, 180 children, and in a public event, we had 38 different mother tongues spoken by these 180 kids. So this diversity was really welcomed. And now, officially, it will not get more difficult for Neudorf because there is this positive, welcoming mood. And I know that we are also in the media, and I don't think that this is absolutely just. But this creates a we feeling, and this is important. And this is not only the only reason why you are able to, survive or win elections, when you stand upright and live according to your principles. And I was in Vienna during the election campaign period, and I congratulated the province governor of Mayor, and then he would say, well, he would be the colleague of my province governor, so just call him the mayor of Vienna. And since we have already reached the second stage, so we have had more than 25 years of experience, but now we are facing another challenge. So what will happen with the people who have actually arrived? So we are now transit municipality. I can tell you from my experience, 7 people who sought protection, former refugees, and they were accommodated in the Sarah facility, and they are now integrated at municipal level. And these are 7 people out of 56 we employ with our municipal authority, but there were no problems. So locals didn't say, well, why do you hire a foreigner and not me? No, this was not the case. These people are integrated. Everybody respects them. These are people who held jobs in their country of origin, which were much better than the current jobs they have, because they are much better skilled. They have higher skills. And now that we have 30 unaccompanied minors, which are supported in the House Sarah, then for the municipality, it is a challenge to make sure that we find traineeships for these people with the companies. So this is a bridge function we assume together with those responsible for this Sarah accommodation, and often we generate success, but we also have to take account of the fact that Neudorf is not the center of the world, and that particularly young people feel more attracted by large cities and then move to larger conurbations. So we cannot expect that those currently 80 people who found protection and support, that they want to stay forever in Neudorf. Now, when I said before that there are 88 municipalities in Burgenland who have not taken in people, and this holds true for the local people, because they all move to Vienna because they have better job opportunities. And for the future, and this is also a challenge for the European Union, people who have fled their home countries, they cannot pick and choose where they end up, but we can never force somebody to stay at a place where there is no hope, no perspective for the future, because then we would create a group of the population which ends up at the bottom level of the income scale. And we want to make sure that those people who want to come to our country, that they also contribute, because integration doesn't mean that you have to learn all our prayers. This is not enough. You also must be able to actually live according to the principle of this republic, and there you should also have the opportunity to contribute to this society. And maybe, final idea I would like to share with you. I'm not a guru, but this is just something I could suggest. I speak about things others have achieved. I'm just the one that backs and supports all that, and I don't turn the other side, and I try to make sure that there is a positive mood. And when we speak about the responsibility we all share and not a burden we share, because this is what people often tend to say. In our small municipality, the principle that has been applied is that everybody who comes is a new citizen of Neudörfel and not an immigrant, although it's just a pun of words. But we do not differentiate according to the reason why this person has arrived, but it is your registration document. Once you have arrived in Neudörfel, you are one of us. And this means that particularly people at the lower end of the income scale can be played off against each other. And then they say, oh, on top of the problems I have, now we also have new immigrants and even I can't find a job. No, we want to make sure that there is equal treatment, and the signal we send out is that everybody enjoys the same value, priority, and importance. So for people who get minimum income, special benefits, but you also have to contribute in order to benefit from the services provided. And, we often run the risk of, incitement to hatred. Fences tend to be erected in heads, and from my point of view, now, we might face a risk that the presidential elections might turn into a plebiscite on refugees, yes or no. And then there is a party where suggests a candidate who always drinks holy water before he starts any negotiations. So the super religious man. So, and then there is another party. And if we really believe and play along these lines, then this election will turn into a plebiscite on refugees, and there will be a winner, sure, but there will be lots of losers, because elections take place at the municipal level, and if people allow a split, a separation line running through municipalities, then we will no longer be able to glue these municipalities again together. So what I said before, that all those who undertake these steps, who try to drive a wedge into the population, that all those are actually aware of what they are doing, and now they say, well, what I say is something Social Democrat says. But sometimes there seems to be a competition who is better at closing doors, and this is not a dignifying game. And people are disencouraged. People who are committed, they are disencouraged. And what we should do is we should raise up those people to a throne who do things, who do the good things. And I would not only call it welcoming culture, but the good is important, what we do in terms of good things. And it is also very indicative of the fact that saying you are welcome turns to become a bad word. So once you are in our municipality, then you are one of us. This should be a guiding principle. And this is the guiding principle you strive to share with all your people. This is something I will never forget. Now I would like to hand over to Andreas Minich. He is Municipal Council for Culture and Economy in Korneuburg. This is a medium-sized city, well, close to Vienna. Well, in other areas of the world, you would call it a suburb of Vienna, so that you know it's very close to Vienna, just a few, 10 minutes or so by car. You have 250, 300 refugees in your city. Out of these, 100 are unaccompanied minors, and this is a major challenge. And we must not close our eyes upon the fact that there are problems. Adolescents tend to have problems, and some of them cause problems, and you have to solve that. What are the solutions you have developed or had to develop spontaneously? Sometimes you cannot react according to a certain planned approach. So what have you done over the last 6 months? Thank you very much for inviting me, dear Robert. Well, you were instrumental and you were participating from day one on. So we have to focus on what is important. And I'm really gratified that Mayor Bosch addressed that this wave of assistance. People want to help refugees, and this led to a we feeling. And we established a platform on how to help in the best manner. Volunteers, programmed apps, and you can, by way of 4 mouse clicks, you could decide what to do, for instance, provide accommodation, or if I cannot provide accommodation, for instance, well, would I like to devote my time, take people by the hand, assist them in their processes with the authorities, for instance, others retired primary school teachers or secondary school teachers turned to us, and now they help us with the German tuition courses. And this has been addressed before. These German classes cost a lot of money, these German courses. One semester, if you attend some public institution, it costs 260 euros. So therefore, we as municipality are very grateful that we have so many volunteers who help in order to provide the best possible education in the field of basic education. So, for instance, you really start to learn a language from scratch, and we have all these volunteers and all these platforms and the networking that had been addressed yesterday, for instance, from the countries of origin, and now this is being discussed with representatives from target countries. So what is important is that all topics are being addressed, all issues are being addressed. As Mayor Babel said, we should strive to solve every problem. We should not make our lives more difficult than it is. There are excellent initiatives by volunteers, for instance, board game evenings, or next to the parish church, there are coffees and people meet. Then we have classes with the Red Cross, for instance. But then when we get decrees or, for instance, decisions which really tell us that we are not allowed to have a game board evening in the parish because we must not force this. We must not force this missionarying of people, and then this is terrible. Imagine, and all these things should be diffused. And we found out very quickly that you mustn't ask. And as Mayor Bosch said it, don't ask, just let people do what they want, that they help. So then you do not have to define rules, but just allow people to do what they would do out of their own anyway. And well, this is what you feel among the people. So this virus is infectious. Helping is fun. Helping makes you happy. And in the meantime, well, we have some families, especially women, who work highly committed, and you really feel that this is a helper syndrome, and you tend to worry more about these women than the refugees, because they spend more time with the refugees and tend to forget everything else. And now we also have to help these helpers and, well, take them by the hand back to the life. Yeah, supervision, right, you are right, supervision is a good opportunity. There are lots of good examples. And we have roughly 200 refugees in Korneuburg. Out of these, 100 unaccompanied minors from Afghanistan. And we installed a bridge class in order to enable these children to learn the German language as fast as possible so that they can be integrated. Well, because of the cultural differences, there are lots of problems in this course of integration. We noticed that with the Syrians, where the Islamic belief is deeply rooted, and where we also have to adopt a tougher approach in defining rules. For instance, simple things, we have to tell people to arrive on time when they are scheduled for a German course, so that the volunteers are not disappointed or disencouraged when people do not, well, turn up. And then at school, the girls should even be, well, called upon, sometimes even forced to participate in the swimming lessons, and that no exceptions are made. And girls also have to participate in the biology classes. And these are things we have to learn on a daily basis. And that sometimes there might be misunderstandings. Well, this is a matter of course, but you just have to remove these obstacles. And I believe that this is the challenge. This is the challenge we, well, require on a daily basis in order to further improve and, well, approach get a learning by doing approach. Thank you very much, Andreas. And in the course of the discussion, and well, yesterday and today, it has become very clear and stressed several times. It is, well, a matter of course that these refugee communities have different backgrounds depending on where they come from. But this holds true for every society. A Syrian and Afghan society is a diverse society, but we subsume everybody under the term of refugee. And this also means that we lose opportunities. Because, you know, we could also take refugees by the hand and, well, also ask them to help in the course of integration, to contribute. And this is why we have always asked refugees to comment in this discussion, and different refugees. So yesterday we heard the young gentleman who was 16 years old when he came to Austria, and he has, well, made an excellent career, so to speak. So he knows German very well. He has excellent German skills and, well, has undergone an education, and I was highly impressed by him. And now we have a young man, not that young, from Syria, Nur al-Soliman, and you live so on the border between Lower Austria and Burgenland, in a small municipality in Burgenland. You live in Burgenland. And is a filmmaker in Syria, Jordan, and in Dubai, I think you worked. Yes. And now, with your family, with your wife and your little son, you are in Austria. You have been in Austria for several months. So what can you report? What are the opportunities, for instance, you see if we integrated refugees better? What are the positive ideas, opportunities, and experience they could share with us?
Thank you for this opportunity. I will try to answer a few topics that were raised here. I would like to address them. Well, I've been here for like 6 or 7 months so far, and for me it was a very smooth experience. Maybe because my asylum application took very little time, so the only challenge that I kept facing is where and how to get information about the next step or what's my status at the moment. Nevertheless, that doesn't apply for many of asylum seekers in this country, because I hear some people who wait for years and years. And for those people, I think it's very hard not to utilize them or not to integrate them from the first time they're here. Since as I can talk from a Syrian scope perspective. Most of the Syrians who arrived during 2015 been in neighboring countries around Syria or inside Syria, and in both cases, their lives been on hold, for years they were waiting for something to happen, and nothing evolved, or they had no chance to continue, to plan for their futures. So they had nothing else but to choose death votes. So when they arrive here, they arrive with really little dreams. It's we don't have, as a generation in general, not only from Syria, we don't have the dreams that our fathers once sought. We don't have that called American dream. So it's not about fancy cars or big houses. It's rather about small human emotional basic needs, such as the feeling to belong to a society and to contribute to that society. And that's my belief, and from the people that I talk to on a daily basis here, and as well as to be acknowledged as individuals. So I think it's very important to realize that current integration process, which is putting everyone into one big pipe, is rather not sustainable, as well as is not fully effective. I think there is a huge need to find bodies that can classify these refugees, especially that the term refugee itself has changed. War doesn't only affect the poor anymore, doesn't affect only skilled workers anymore, it affects everyone basically. So we need bodies or entities who can classify refugees for much smaller groups that share the same interests or the same potential, identify these potentials as well as the challenges, and then work accordingly. It needs to be a very sustainable plan, because we live in a world that's mainly dominant by big corporations, by weapon manufacturers, and I don't think, we all know that war will not cease to exist. So the movement of masses between countries will continue to happen. So we need a sustainable plan. At the same time, I think we really need to overcome this discussion in theory and start to act now. I mean, because how I perceive it, that media outlets been very generous when tackling the refugee issues. They've been on the positive side. If that changed for some reason and mainstream media changed its position, I think there might be a shift in the public opinion, and we can't overcome that unless everyone is integrated. So people who are already integrated, then there is a bigger chance to overcome that clash. I'm not an expert in integration. I'm just talking about my personal experience. But I really think that this is the one area that needs attention. I think we all witnessed the generosity of people in Austria. I personally witnessed that. It was one-of-kind experience when you would go to all these Bahnhofs and see individuals, just citizens coming to help, and not on a small scale, but a much bigger scale. We didn't witness that anywhere else. If I may just share one experience, so we all a few years ago. I mean, during 2004 to 2007, I was volunteering in the Red Crescent in Syria. And in 2006, there was a conflict in the south of Lebanon, between Israel and Lebanon, and we received over 1 million refugees from Lebanon. Of course, there are not so much cultural differences. These are our brothers and sisters, so most of them were hosted in individual people's houses. Nevertheless, there was a need for extra spaces, for extra housing locations, and with the help of solely private donors, we managed to build a camp next to a city of Aleppo that hosts 6,000 refugees. Now the thing is, I served there for a few months. I volunteered to work there in a few months, and after only a few years, I find myself in a very similar camp in Traiskirchen, yet me and my family on the other side of the equation. I think that I'm sharing this story just to ask everyone today that next time you are in a position to to make a decision that touches somebody else's life, think no one is immune anymore. We should think that we should put ourselves in his shoes, or so to speak. And thank you, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Niwa.
Well, this reminds us of the fact that any stability is brittle, and any problem that is crass somewhere can be also affecting us, and the potential is there. It lies dormant, and I do not want to engage in alarmist thinking. But now let us move on. We will now hear the experts and representatives of the NGOs. I should like to start with Eric Fenninger. He is the managing director of Volkshilfe, People's Aid, or whatever his title is, Volkshilfe Austria. And we have some question from Slido, and I should like to address one question to you right away. Does any organization have submitted a proposal for a global distribution strategy? Have you any such proposals? I know that you generally deal with these issues, and this is why I address this question to you without imposing on you any instructions what you should say. Eric. May I perhaps approach this question? I would like to start by talking about a topic, namely arriving and leaving. I should like to talk about the framework conditions and the concrete dangers and opportunities. The first item which really affects me, what is the type of Europe to which the refugees come? And they now arrive in a European territory which 30 years ago started dismantling the welfare state and to destroy the welfare state in some countries. And from my perspective, and historically proven, the welfare state was the instrument to avoid fascism and war. The welfare state was the instrument to prevent war, so that it was not care for the poor, but the participation of all the population, so that no more in the future there could be war or destruction. And we now see that in Europe we do not have this successful model of participation of all. We no longer export this model to other countries, but now all of a sudden we have a poor and rich model here in Europe. So we imported this gap between the poor and the rich. So the question is, where do people come from? Many people arrive in our territory because we do not have not only because they were exposed to violence or war or persecution, but they come from a world where this gap is even stronger than here in our countries, where many people have no work. Very often 20% is the unemployment rate. So this is tremendous. And I should like to remind you of the study presented by Oxfam on Monday, which shows that 62 individual human beings own as much as the half of the poorer world population. Just imagine, it means one person has more than 49 million have together as assets. So this is obscene for me, and it means that, and we have to say something else, in the past 5 years, these 62 people earned even more, and they got 44% more. They increased their assets by 42% in the past 5 years. That means half of the world population became 41% poorer. So there is a dramatic connection with an unbridled capitalism that is no longer controlled by politics, but politicians have become puppets of this economic system. This is a tragedy, and this always leads to hunger, terror, war, and starvation, and also to right-wing tendencies, because politics no longer function. And now let me come back to Europe. We are seeing now that real politics has not improved the conditions under which the refugees can live in our countries, and this coincides with the fact that people who are even poorer than our poor population that they enter our territories. And I should like to remind you that a day after Bruno Kreisky's 105th birthday, we are here together. And in the 30s, Bruno Kreisky fled from fascism, and he managed to go to enter Denmark. And the frontier people told him, "Go back to Austria." And he said, and you can read that in his biography, "If you send me back now, then you expose me to people from whom I've just fled." And the European political case decides in 20 of the national states not to admit a single refugee. And Austria, the day before yesterday, introduced a ceiling on the immigration of refugees. And if this is put into practice, then this means that in the countries where we heard the reports yesterday, Lebanon, Jordan, and so on, the countries that are working in favor of refugees will get all these refugees now in the coming years, and the others are simply shutting themselves off. And this means that the door is closed. The door is closed, and those people will be killed who would not kill anybody themselves. So the question is, how can we overcome this problem? And I have confidence in those people who I no longer have as much trust in those who are engaged in real policies. Some years ago, I still had trust in them, but I see that they only pursue a policy of the right extreme. And this is a policy of feelings that instill fears instead of reducing fears. We heard that from the mayors. That was very obvious in their reports. And fear means a policy and a philosophy of narrowing. Politicians believe that they can remove the fears, but in reality, with their language and with their statements and with their political contributions, they instill more fear. So I come from social work, and people tell me, let us overcome this narrowing, but the politicians are simply increasing this narrowing. So my confidence, the confidence I have in the civil society, this is a society of empathy, based on empathy, and also social action, the concrete help offered to refugees over the past 6 months. And I hope that we all can get together, and we have to organize a political protest against the policies that are pursued right now. I want to talk about concrete matters. This is also important. How could we approach this matter? And we have already heard some ideas, and the guiding principle, I think the only realistic approach would be the utopias. And we should orient ourselves to utopias. So we should start with Europe. I think we have to engage in a fight that all national states would and must admit refugees. We need to agree on quotas, and in this way we can control the influx of refugees with clear finance transfers of funds. We need a clear definition of the funds that will have to flow. Otherwise, I think goodwill is not enough. Apparently, goodwill has disappeared, and the relationship to human rights is no longer as pronounced as it was. But the quota should also fixed for Austria, and I think our colleague Bosch has given the figures. It is absurd that 40% of the Austrian communities have no refugees that they have admitted, and only that they have not admitted these refugees. And the quota rule should be applied and must be translated into reality. This is feasible. This can be accepted by the population at large. And we see that because of our social work. So we see that we can all show our commitment. And I should like to take up what Peter Hake said. Full support. Language must be learned, not only after some time, not only after the acquisition of asylum rights. No, right from the first day, people are afraid that we invest something in language tuition and then the person goes somewhere else. This is a crazy approach. So right from the first day, we have to offer language tuition, and in the detailed processes which I looked at, I see that we are totally unprofessional. If we take a look how language tuition is offered today, how language courses are offered, then these are highly professional. They sometimes last for several hours a day, and native speakers really offer these courses. And very often we have 2 lessons a day, or 4 lessons a week. That is ridiculous. This is unprofessional. And within the space of 3 or 4 months, and this is very simple, a skills check should be conducted. So you immediately see who is qualified for what and what are the skills of the individual, what education is available, what experience has been gained, or with young people, what do young people want to study. And of course, in this phase, we can offer these services, and then we can, on a very concrete basis, develop a vision for the future with regard to education, training, or whatever. This would be easy to implement, but it's what we need is a willingness to do all that. But we will definitely fight for this. And in the World Cafe, we all together, and this encouraged me very much, and I take some ideas back. So we have to say goodbye to paternalism. We should integrate refugees into refugee aid programs, and many people do not understand why don't they get committed and so on. It's very often the general conditions and the guidelines that we have, and we already exchanged our views on this. So we should try to involve refugees to a much greater extent, and to involve them in all activities. They would have a better self-esteem. This would overcome the passiveness and encourage people to become very active, which is very important. And at the end, I should like to say, I believe I don't understand why all these opportunities are not taken. As of the 1st of January, we have this new law dealing with the social integration year that was proposed, and refugees can work for general interest organizations, non-profit organizations. So this means we have to integrate them to a greater extent, and we should ease the conditions for access, and 10,000 refugees could be offered jobs in this during this integration year. I'm not only talking about the social services only. Why don't you go to rural areas, for example, to the Waldviertel in Lower Austria, where so many people are leaving these areas, where you have only old people who stay and so on. So we could definitely negotiate with these communities wherever fields are barren. We could build up infrastructure. We could ask refugees to produce food and all that. So we would have a tremendous potential. We know that from Gutenstube or in Vienna and in other communities where financially disadvantaged people will paint corridors or whatever, and the situation would be improved and particularly those who are afraid all of a sudden realize that refugees help and they would overcome their fears. And in Europe, we could say, well, we know that the capitalist economy never gives all people jobs. Why don't we give everybody the chance to work? We have to open another labor market so as to get full employment of everybody, which is socially fair and socially equitable. We can manage. And at the end, I should only like to say the following, because I'm very impressed by what has been said here at the conference, and many of us are. So, Andre Helles and the Kreisky Forum, I should like to thank them all for organizing this conference. And Robert Misik, thank you very much that we have been able to participate in this conference. Thank you, Eric, for the thanks that only goes to the Kahane Foundation and to me and to Kreisky Forum and to many, many others who were involved in organizing the conference. I do not want to steal your time, but I should like to share the thanks with all who were involved. Massa Ghaffari, she is a member or an activist or the founder of a small NGO. Flight Ahead is the name. And this focuses on young people to impart skills, but also help them organize their leisure time. And therefore, this body facilitates the arrival of refugees and offers them opportunities and perspective like any of these small NGOs. The economic situation is probably very precarious. It is more it's probably very difficult to survive because the state does not support you. We should actually say what a boon that you're there. We would have a catalogue of demands, but we can also write the message of this conference is we want more money. We should add this. And this is a problem that every one of us has here. I do not want to anticipate too much. Massa, you have the floor. Money is important, but it's not everything. And we are trying through our work and in our associations to support young people and children who have fled, particularly unaccompanied minors, to help them in a particular way, to give them some basis and to allow them to arrive here, because we analyze their needs that go beyond the basic needs. We also try to find out what interests they have, who has some skills, who wants to do a particular thing, who wants to do a particular thing during leisure time, because unfortunately, it often happens that these young people have no access to various leisure time activities. And particularly for this group, it's very important to engage in active leisure time, to have some activities, no matter which. And secondly, it's also important that they should be offered some activities to overcome their traumas, to be distracted, to not only to think about their everyday lives, but to promote their talents. And we try to promote these talents, and we try to go to different organizations. We try to reach the maximum number of young people, but of course our capacity is limited. We are making our best efforts. And I thought often we don't do that, but very often we hear discussions about our group, and they are called the weakest part of society. When we talk about refugees or young people, this is, of course, a group that deserves particular protection. I'm against this description. They are not the weakest in society because these people are not weak. They are made vulnerable and they are made weak, or they are kept weak because of the ban on employment. And I do not believe that it is enough to say we want people to get to know our values and accept our values and appreciate our values, the Austrian democratic achievements and so on, as you said. If we do not manage to live in accordance with our values, we have to set the example. How can you explain that young people are simply ignored and left to their own resources? This is not acceptable. How can we explain to them what our values are when we ignore them? This has to go hand in hand with our readiness to live in accordance with our value, not only to preach the values. And then, of course, it is possible to say, well, this violates our values. Women have to be respected. Women have to be respected throughout the world. It does not mean that somebody who comes from Syria is hostile to democracy only because there is a dictatorship in this country. And As I said, we are trying in our association to discuss socio-political topics with the young people, and we see that this, unfortunately, is not offered on a broad scale. So if we were not there as an association, the young people would not have any people with whom they could talk about sexism or ask question, what is sexism? Has this anything to do with sex? They don't even know this. And we, in the course of our practice, we find out that there are many more deficiencies than we had originally assumed. For example, yesterday we talked a lot about the lost generation, the loss of young people and children who are on flight, who are in neighboring countries, but also those who are here in Europe. And unfortunately, they run the risk of becoming member of the lost generation. In Austria, there is mandatory schooling and compulsory schooling, but there are many young people who do not go to school, and the youth welfare office does not intervene. And in some cases, we talk with children, with the parents, and we help them, and we say, you have to see to it that they go to the youth welfare office and they have to register for places in their school. But we only reach out to a fraction, and we know that the unreported cases are much higher, and many children under 14 years of age do not attend school. So how can we preach these values if we trample them underfoot? And it has to be realized that that people are forced to be inactive. This is terrible. This is like torture, particularly for people who have to cope with so many traumas. And what I also wanted to say, the aspect of voluntary work and the readiness to help, we all appreciate this. Of course, it's marvelous we had that, and what we saw during the last month is more than overwhelming and desirable. We hope this readiness to help will be maintained, discouraged, this civil commitment, but it must not be overlooked and forgotten that these people have compensated a lot, and these are things which would be the responsibilities of the state, and they had to fend for themselves. And the gentleman from Volkshilfe said it's dangerous when the welfare state starts to be dismantled, and this is a clear signal, a clear sign that voluntary helpers and NGOs are starting to compensate more and more and to invest more and more where the state has failed. And this cannot go on. So we need professionalism and not only tourism. So voluntary work, there must be a balance between good and necessary voluntary work and the readiness to help and permanent protest against. The state must perform its task and play its role as the main responsible body in this context. And we do have the legal provisions, but they have to be coped with. A minor refugee must not be treated differently from a minor Austrian and who has no parents. So in practice, this is not done. Let me repeat, how do we want to preach our values that are magnificent if we disregard them with regard to them?
Danke.
Thank you, Martha. Not only do these people have to be respected and cherished, they must be integrated into the solutions, not only into the solutions for the refugee problems, but also into all the solutions for all of us. So this goes beyond the tasks of the coping with the refugee crisis. I say that because I do put its finger on it. Why shouldn't refugees be used as co-designers for new solutions with regard to all of our questions? Klaus Schwertner, you're working as the Secretary General of Caritas. Are you the Secretary General? Yes, that's correct. You have worked for many years in this position and in this area. We have known each other for a long time, and there are always new challenges, and we share a lot of what we had to learn. I believe for you the same applies. You learn by advancing, and you learn a lot of practical things. What can you report on, Klaus? I would like to take up what you have just said. We have to set the example with regard to our values. When I look back at on this week and the political debate, I believe we are experiencing once again what the German weekly The Zeit had announced, that is to say, the path to evil. I believe that we have to stop thinking that evil words or ceilings or whatever we fix here in Austria will prevent people to flee from terror and a lack of perspective. We have not reached this situation. We are still debating. We are still discussing how we can be evil and cruel in order to prevent people to flee. This is not possible. And we are talking about change in the general trend. Well, I would like to see this on site. The foreign minister in Davos, the Austrian foreign minister said, we are being crushed. I do not know where he was that he feels he's being crushed. Perhaps in Davos, in Austria, he was not crushed. Definitely not in the past weeks and months. On the contrary, I should like to hope that we can discuss positive developments, and we have learned a lot in the past months and weeks. And I would not say we were sprinting. We did not walk. We had to sprint. And we were successful. And this is something we saw in Vienna because people cooperated. People were prepared to help. There's most diverse organizations, the city, the Austrian Federal Railways, but also civil society. And we saw a renaissance of civic society, and I'm very happy about that. We cannot say welcome culture, and I should like to say I am against the fact we can no longer address matters. Yes, we need a culture of welcome. And if the year 2015 was the year of welcome, in 2016 we need a welcome structure. So we have to see to it that all the achievements of civil society should now be more better organized and be structured to a greater extent. I am really working very hard concerning the criticism, to combat the criticism of parallel societies. And people are building up this parallel society, and they are creating, or they're building fences around their houses, and they don't even give people a chance to arrive in a society, and then they shout when they have to organize themselves and when they end up in a parallel society. So it is my request to dismantle the fences which we have in our heads, in our minds, in order to set the example and to really start working on the things which matter. I was talking about language. Now, it was mentioned earlier. I am shocked. I am embarrassed that religious terms as love of your neighbor, love of your changed to love of the foreigners. And the politicians who say they have Christian roots use these terms. And I do not want to have religious terms be instrumentalized for political reasons, with such a delicate topic as people fleeing from events. But I believe also at present we do not have such a plan. We saw that in the past weeks, the double integration, we mentioned this. On the one hand, it will be possible to offer language courses and to get the support from association in sports, the voluntary firefighters and so on. So to permit people to arrive. But of course, they also come with a lot of skills and capacities, as you said earlier. On the other hand, we should not forget that in Austria there are people also who need support. We have poor people here, and we talked a lot about the welfare state. When I think of the people who receive care allowances, people who are affected by unemployment, then of course we also need to emit signals. Double integration. This is not seen in housing policies. I would like to see a situation where mayors more often, more frequently, could appear on TV in the news. This was satisfactory. This was satisfactory because here there was soberness and facts were quoted. Because in many communities, apparently, there is a trend to do things properly, whereas in the echelons of high politics, there are only fake debates. In the municipalities and local communities, integration work has to be done. People have to be enabled to arrive, really, and we have to do that together with the refugees. And I remember the meeting which we had in Neudörfel with a young refugee. We talked with a young refugee who proudly said that since the day before he was a member of the fire brigade and he has his own uniform, he was invited to join, and he really was happy that he was a member of the fire brigade. And I believe these associations will play a major role. Integration work will not only be offered by organizations that have always traditionally be working in the refugee area, but also other associations will be instrumental. I should like to mention one example from our work, which may be a minor example, but which is now like a beacon. You know it. We were there, the Magdas Hotel. We are trying there to get out of this deficit-oriented attitude. We want to show our potentials, our strength, and the strength of these refugees. And why don't we give them an opportunity, a chance to get involved? So we have a new approach. Of course, it will not be feasible to apply to all areas, but we have a social business hotel, and we have experts from the hotel industry, together with people who are migrants or who come from a refugee background, and we will celebrate our first anniversary, and we really turned the trend, returned the trend. So these are not refugees who depend on help. They are the hosts there. They, in the Magdas Hotel, they accommodate international guests, and right from the beginning, we are also trying to call this an open hotel. We manage as an open hotel to involve the Viennese population. And we had knitting workshops and gardening projects and so on. Various projects were developed, and urban gardening was offered as one example. And why do I talk about this example? I think there were reports on this hotel worldwide, because this had a tremendous effect. We did not even realize, and there had never been a hotel before that was managed by refugees. So it shows the capacity of and the abilities of refugees, and it shows what is possible when you embark on a new way and a new path. And I wish that in the face of these challenges, we should seek new paths. We should take advantage of the potential, of the chances, the opportunities. The skill checks of the MS are very important. They go in the right direction. There is not one refugee. People have different qualifications, different skills. We are talking about people and not about ceilings for people.
Danke, Klaus.
Thank you very much, Klaus. So this is a wide range of issues we are discussing today. And there's one question which has not yet been addressed, and this is the legal situation and the legal status of people who have fled their home countries is very important. Once you feel that you are on safe ground and solid ground, you will act completely differently than when you believe that you cannot be sure where you are going. So you, dear Georg, are one of the leading human rights experts, and then sometimes you feel like reaching for the stars, and you are, well, fighting against windmills. Well, yeah, this is the floor. Well, I'm not fighting against windmills, but I have been active in this area for the last 25 years, and I have always had to address interesting phenomena. And one of these phenomena is that currently in Austria, we have this very sophisticated legal order, and we act according to rules. And over the last few months, we had to improvise. And at the same time, this improvising was designed along principles. Well, let me elaborate on that. At the EU level and also at national level, in our legal orders, we have sophisticated rules about everything that refugees are not allowed to do, what must not happen to them, how they are to be redistributed as far away as possible. And we found out that we hardly have any rules on how to integrate them most quickly. And here we have to start to improvise. At the same time, we are experiencing a situation where there is an ostensible dissolution of rules, an undermining of rules, the Dublin III regulation, according to which, in principle, people can be sent to other countries, although they might oppose to that. This in the face of the resistance of states, and thousands of inhabitants cannot be implemented, although this resistance is free from violence. And we are seeing a situation when politics, with just little legal knowledge, but all the louder, starts to engage in a discussion on the definition of legal terms. So, for instance, what is a refugee? What is a safe third country? This is not discussed at the legal level because their discussions have already been completed. And this is currently being discussed at the political level. And I, as somebody who deals with legal issues on a daily basis, and it is my job to, develop reliable forecasts based on rules, forecasts on how authorities will act. And now I have to start saying, under normal circumstances, the following would be applicable. And then I start explaining. And therefore, it seems to be all the more important that we, who are forced to improvise at many levels, that we do not forget that this improvising is driven by rules and should be driven by rules. And one of the most important rules is a fundamental principle of the European legal order and also of the Austrian legal order and also of the German constitution, because there it is included in Article 1, and this is the dignity of the human being. And in the European Human Rights Charter, it is Article 3 where it is enshrined. And why is this principle so important? Well, there are several reasons for that. On the one hand, in times when there is a feeling of insecurity, also among the local residents in Austria, when they feel that there are rules which are currently not being observed, politics and lawyers can no longer tell us what is going to happen today. And this creates a feeling of insecurity, especially among local residents. And particularly in such a situation, it is necessary not only to tell the local residents, but also those who arrive, that there are certain principles, and these principles will be heeded, and you can rely on these principles. And this creates a feeling of security, which is the prerequisite for retaining human dignity. And the sophisticated term of human dignity, but there are two sides to it. On the one hand, it is about retaining people's dignity, and on the other hand, to avoid that people are dealt with in an undignified manner and in the worst cases are being tortured. But it is at the same time about the following, that those who were forced to or who want to treat people in an undignified manner, punish them in an undignified manner, disrespecting human dignity, that they torture them, that these people necessarily lose respect for themselves. And this, there is enough scientific proof of that. and evidence of that. And in public discussion with mayors and people who are committed in civil society, they have often said, but this is a matter of course. You should be able to look into a mirror. And this is what it express. I try to retain the dignity of the people I deal with so that I can still respect myself, and that is a very important aspect. And if we do not do that, and well, this is what is currently being discussed, do we say that fundamental rules are no longer valid? Will we stop heeding the Geneva Convention? Do we explain that by quoting Article 3? Or do we close the border saying, well, we do not care what is going to happen with these people who knock at our door? If we do not respect these principles, that we as a society run the risk of incurring a major trauma, because then we all, at the end of the day, run the risk that we are no longer able as a society to look into a mirror. Well, I used this wording just to paint a very clear picture, because we arrive at a point where we see that the legal rules which are currently ostensibly being questioned go far beyond simply applying rules. And for us as a collective society, and also for our future, they are important. Also with respect to the question whether we will be able within 1 year or 5 years' time to collectively look into the mirror and looking at the image in the mirror saying we like it or not.
Danke, Georg Bürstmeier. Ich mache hier eine
Thank you, George Fürstmeier. There's a brief statement. At 11:30, there is a press conference, and some journalists have arrived. And I would like to tell you that we will start at 11:45 and have to be there at the round table, and immediately afterwards there is the press conference. And now I'd like to hand over to Laura Schoch. Laura Schoch is the chairperson of the Federal Youth Representative, and she is very committed to providing support services to young people, unaccompanied minors, and at the same time you have also conducted service. You have more than just knowledge based on experience, but we are highly interested in your experience, and particularly in the good examples we could all learn from. Laura, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Robert. Well, now I would like to thank you, as Eric has done before, for organizing this conference, that we have the opportunity to exchange views, and particularly that the many mayors from neighboring countries, Greece, Turkey, Italy, were here yesterday and shared with us their experience the last few weeks and months. For political person who feel close to social democracy, as I do, have been very hard. And government gave in to right-wing populists, and first of all it was the fence, and now it is the ceiling. And well, you need to have the courage to work at the practical level, and also share with the people who have had a positive image, and those who are happy that you are there, and that you were not the victim of a shell. And particularly in the border regions, there are committed mayors who are willing to fight and struggle, and who told us that they want to continue. In Austria, 800 out of 2,000 municipalities have not admitted a single refugee, and there are unaccompanied minors, and I want to talk about them. They are not dealt with along the Children's Rights Convention, although Austria ratified it. Austria The government says there are good and bad young people. The bad ones are those who were not born here or whose parents had to flee or who are alone. So before speaking about my work as the chairperson, and well, based on my practical experience, I coordinate a project which is comparable to Flight Ahead, and it's called Austrian Children's Assistance Connect. And I really thought about that. This conference is something, which provided a lot of food for thought for me. Yesterday, the mayor of Lesbos said that our action is determined by our hearts and by our awareness. And I also believe that I'm one of them who said that this is a fundamental feeling we all share, and all the progressive representatives who are here, there is something else they should try to achieve, is to enhance the participation of women, also at the municipal level. And in the afternoon, at night, I checked that Austria has 6 female mayors, and in other European countries, the situation is not different. And this also defines people's awareness. And this also has to do with the impact of political situation on women, especially women who have fled their home countries. And then we should consider further opportunities for participation at a municipal level, also by people who have fled. So I think that we are facing a major task now.
Der Applaus sagt mir, dass ich sagen muss.
Well, what I wanted to say is that there are lots of people who obviously support my point of view. As regards my work as a chairperson of the Austrian Federal Youth Representation, and we are the legal representation of all children and young people in Austria, and we committed ourselves not only to represent the privileged young people and adolescents, but particularly to speak on behalf of those who have no voice at all. It is, a coincidence and fortune that whether you were born in Austria or not, or whether you came to Austria as a refugee or not, and this is something we must remember on a daily basis. And in this spirit, it is very important for us that we, as an association, do not talk about young people, but we also want to give them a say in every respect. And for this reason, in autumn, under a campaign on unaccompanied minor refugees in Austria, we conducted the first survey on the actual realities of life of unaccompanied minor refugees. And we conducted this survey among 70 young people. The results will be presented in a few weeks, but I can give you some preliminary figures. We did not address the issue of how is your flight experience, what are the issues you are facing, but we asked them, where do you live? How do you want to live? What do you learn currently? What do you want to learn? And what are the opportunities for further development you see? And we had a look at large camps like Dreiskirchen, which is more or less a camp which houses mainly young unaccompanied minor refugees. So, and then we also had a look at young people who live in a shared accommodation for an unaccompanied minor. And then also we looked at young people who lived at a special shelters or emergency accommodations. And sometimes we tend to have a certain feeling, and there are lots of stories which can be combined to form a huge whole. And the figures show that all these stories are true, that this general picture is that children's rights do not seem to be applicable for young accompanied minors, and the institutions that have to be organized by the federal government are those institutions where young unaccompanied minors are dealt with in a most terrible way. 87% of the kids in Dreiskirchen wish to have the opportunity of a locker where they can lock their things, but they know that their things are safe. When 87% say that this is what we want, but this is the minimum, the right to privacy, to know where can my stuff be safe. So is there a locker where I can lock in my stuff so that it's safe? And then we asked them, what do you want to become? Is there any, professional goal you have? And this was everything from astronauts to a vet to a nurse. What really impressed me that more than 50% of the young people said that they believe that they can make it, they can realize their goal. And this is, a huge figure considering the conditions they are under, and that sometimes they are left at their own devices. They are all fighters. They have a will and they want to succeed, and we need to perceive them as such. And it is our task, and this has been mentioned several times today, we have to enable them to learn German. We have to become more flexible. These young people are here. These are the new young people of Austria. They are here to stay. And if we do not incapacitate them right now and empower them right now and say, we appreciate you, you are part of our society, then we will lose them and they will be the new impoverished of tomorrow. And this is a major problem, and we need to confront that. And I'm from Vienna, and I really followed the discussion that has been going on in Vienna. At the beginning, there was a lot of euphoria, and I was proud of hearing by the competent city council and by Mr. Peter Hacker. Well, obviously, there is no legal basis for the things we do. Well, we don't care. These people are here, and we have to create a basis to make sure that they can live a dignified life here, that they can arrive and settle in a dignified manner. We can not try to seek loopholes or so. We have to create the conditions here and now, because this is important. We have to sound out what is possible so that the conditions for the people who have fled improve in Austria and in Europe at large. And we must not quote laws in order to justify treatment that does not respect human dignity, and thus lifting this treatment up to a legal level. And in 2 weeks' time, we will present this study, and at the same time, as a federal youth representation, we will continue to fight for counteracting the idea of tightening asylum legislation, which involves negative impacts on young people who have fled their home countries, and this will be enshrined in the laws and under the Asylum summits. We were told that we also agreed on the negative situation. And from a children's rights point of view and from a human rights point of view, you cannot do that because I always quote children's rights because I believe they are of the utmost importance, and we must not admit a situation where the asylum situation procedure becomes even more intransparent so that people do not know what is going to happen with them. This must not happen, in fact. And this must not be enshrined in a law on top of that. 2 very brief statements now. Alongside my voluntary activity as a chairperson of a federal youth representative, I said I work for the Austrian Kinderfreunde. This is children's friends organization set up by the Social Democratic Party, and this has been in existence over 100 years. And in summer, just because we believe you can not leave young people at their own devices. And we created, together with other youth organizations, the project Connect, and it grew very quickly because there is huge demand. And we try to support young refugees and show them that there are people who are happy to have you here. We believe in you. We support and strengthen you. And we would also like to enable you to participate in our society so that you can contribute to our society. The Kinderfreunde, this children's friends, I think is the largest private organizer of kindergartens in Vienna. And we also support accommodation, and we also support young people who put together programs for other young people, and we want to also include young refugees. because we believe that this is approach and this is the path we need to embark along together with these young people. And let me stress again that I'm so happy to be here, and there's a lot for me to take home with. And I hope that in the future there will be further interlinking, networking, so that we can maintain our power and motivation as long as possible, because we will need that. Thank you very much.
Reinhard Hundsmüller.
Reinhard Hundsmüller is the manager of the Arbeiter-Samariter-Bund. This is a huge emergency and relief organization. And I asked him, have you ever had a day off over the last 5 months? And naturally he said, no, not a single day off. So what have you experienced over the last few months? What are the best practices, the good experience you want to share with us, or what would you like to see, Mr. Hundsmüller? Thank you very much for inviting me. And when the organizer asked us today to share best practice examples, then let me start by mentioning that the large majority of these best practice examples was created by civil society, by associations, by municipalities who care for refugees and NGOs which are active in this area. And all this was not made possible, in fact, by the federal government, and therefore tell the federal government at the press conference what we have spoken about, how important this event is, and please call upon the federal government to focus on governing and not on reacting, because then we would find it much easier. Because if there had not been civil society activity over the last few months, then the situation in Austria would have been a completely different one. This is just my introductory remark, but I have lots of examples. Currently, we have 7,500 refugees we support in Austria. There are small accommodations, families of 10, or large accommodations with 1,400 people that are accommodated. We do lots of things which have been addressed today. Right from the beginning on, we involve our refugees so that they do not only see how you live in a Western enlightened democracy, so that they can also participate in that. They work, for instance, in day-to-day activities. They work in the security area. They work in the kitchens. So they design their daily activities for themselves. And in one of our large accommodations, a temporary accommodation, this is where people stay until they can move to a smaller accommodation. We immediately set up a kindergarten together with the Kinderfreunde, and we fund on a daily basis German classes, because we believe that if people want to stay in Austria, then they have to learn German, and we paid for that ourselves. But this is not money down the drain. It is well invested money. We have several hundred children which are trained, who are trained, and we have teachers from the Arab regions, native speakers, and we do not only share with them the German language, but we also contribute to making sure that there is a calm situation, large camps. There are lots of different backgrounds, ethnical backgrounds, people from ethnical backgrounds, and sometimes there is a risk. And now we made sure that the situation is calm. Children play with each other, mothers come, and they also learn German. And this is, for instance, a best practice example. In a large camp with 1,400 people, you can calm the situation and deal with people in a very respectful manner. And we also did that during Christmas, although we know that the majority of the people are Muslims, and together with the Muslim community in Austria, we discussed on what to do, so how to respect the feelings of the people in the camps. And it was a beautiful Christmas party, and we want to share that with everybody. This is something you really should do. And when we speak about association, then, we filtered out by conducting checks, for instance, where there are athletes. We have refugees who work, who play, for instance, in associations of football at the province level, and with the 400 unaccompanied minor. And we accommodated in several different facilities, and we wanted to make sure that they can attend secondary education and complete a secondary modern school. And this is the start for undergoing further education and training. And fortunately, the social ministry has assisted us, and we have lots of people who come to our institution that they represent, for instance, their companies, construction companies, for instance, says what they do, and they pledged to actually take young people as trainees. So they learn German, they are able to complete secondary education, and then they can undergo traineeship. And now that I've heard the press conference is to start soon, let me quote another example. We have welcoming receptions for the citizens. We can operate very closely with the local mayors, and where we, for instance, organized a party where the local residents showed to refugees what their home is about, and then subsequently there was a collection, and the money collected was to be used to improve the living situation of the refugees, and the spokesperson of the refugees. And he calls the home manager mommy, and he said, no, we don't want the money. We have arrived in Austria, we have an umbrella. We spent the money for the victims of the earthquake in Nepal, and this really moved us a lot, and this is an example we want to share with you. And the final 5-6 minutes is for the man next to me, Michael Kalupka. He also has a practical background, and he is from the Diakonie. This is a religious Catholic organization, and best practice examples. Well, I find it easy because everything has been said. Nevertheless, I want to start by thanking the mayors and representatives from the region, because I was highly impressed by not only their reports, their dramatic reports, and I heard that they need massive support, but they did never mention the word that they were overtaxed. And nobody said that we are overburdened. Nobody said we can no longer help. They said, help us so that we are able to continue to provide assistance. But nobody said that they were overtaxed. Well, why is Austria overtaxed? Why is the burden too heavy for Austria? Well, there are two different images, opposing images of the state and of the people. Some see the state as something which is dedicated to the common good, where you become active, where you consider the person somebody who is active, who wants to do something good. And then there are others who say, well, we have to reduce the attractiveness of Austria, and we have to see people as sheep who want to, well, stay in a hammock. And I also use the short version because people say, well, we want to make the state less attractive for refugees, but this doesn't work. You can only reduce the attractiveness of Austria in general, because when our social standards are at the level of, for instance, of Bulgaria, people don't want to come to Austria, but the question is whether we'll still want to live in such an Austria. But if these two images, well, are compared, then 95% of the Austrians, wherever we adopt a positive approach in the municipalities and so on, their coexistence works well. And, well, it is the governing parties who feel that they are overtaxed, overburdened by the political analysis on how to deal with right-wing populism. And this is the true upper ceiling which has been introduced. And obviously, the federal governments just mimic what, let me use the term, idiots have said. But I was asked to present positive results, 3 practical results. We were surprised that more than 2,500 families in Austrians opened their private houses, their private homes. We had not expected that ourselves. But now that we know that from the government level, they seem to bid farewell to this welcoming culture, people find it difficult to offer the private houses, private accommodation. This is a negative impact we see. And I am not aware of a single accommodation where there wouldn't be more supporters or more German teachers than we would require. Well, this is a matter of fact, but I can tell you what we have established works very well. That where I see a best practice from the diaconia I represent, which could work better, somehow something was overlooked. And what was forgotten is that more information is required, particularly sharing of legal information. And this has always been a stepchild in Austria because they believe that when people are well informed, then probably proceedings might take longer, then probably people stay longer. No, quite on the contrary. Information is the most important thing in order to speed up the pace of proceedings and also to inspire a feeling of security among refugees and Austrians. And then they said, well, we need a construction, a housing program. And then they say, well, in my municipality, I have 5,000 people who have no housing. Well, then launch housing offensive for 5,000 people who wait for housing and then for refugees. We do not know whether these politicians will do that. I do not know whether they are willing to learn. Now, we have obviously highly educated candidates for the presidential office who also speak Latin, and there's an ethic principle, and you cannot say, you can not commit somebody to do things they are not able to do. But, well, you have to be aware of the fact that before there's another ethic principle that actually applies for Austria, and this principle is that everybody who can shoulder more is able to, is committed to shouldering more, to well, carry a heavier burden. And this is why we do it and why we have succeeded in Austria, although presidential candidates tend to quote only half of Latin sentences and obviously have no idea about what Christian charity is about. And I'm shocked about the statements of the People's Party's presidential candidate. And now the moderator.